Okay, so in this video we're going to be looking at coding and what pseudocode is and lots of other different languages that you can use to code a computer program. Okay, so in this video we're going to be looking at coding and the languages used to code and the big variety that there are out there. We're going to look a little bit at pseudocode and what that is. So we'll start off looking at pseudocode. So pseudocode is a cross between an English language and a machine coding language. So it's kind of a bit of a conduit between the two. It allows you to understand what's going on, but still has a little bit of the structure of a normal coding language. It's designed for both humans to be able to read and understand very quickly without really knowing any detailed coding at all. It's a great way to get your head around coding and to kind of prepare what you want to code without getting bogged down in all the syntax and getting all of the structure correct. It gives you a good outline of what's going on. And it uses ideas within coding, so it might use if or while loops, but it doesn't get all caught up with that finicky detail that can get confusing. So let's look at a couple of examples. First example is you might create a function or a method to go to sleep. And in pseudocode, you just kind of write it out. You still use your brackets because it helps keep that structure of coding. But if we were to write one for going to sleep, you might just write in English the major steps you do. So function go to sleep, go to the bedroom. Then you get undressed, get into your pajamas, get into bed, close your eyes. And that's the end of our method. So you can see that there's no real coding involved, but it does go through it in a step-by-step, very methodical manner. And that helps bridge the gap between what we understand and the coding languages that are out there. So that's what pseudocode is. We're going to look at a couple of examples of pseudocode. For example, driving a car. Give it a go yourself. Try and write down in pseudocode the basic steps for driving a car, and then we'll come and have a look at one idea of how that might look. Okay, so hopefully you did all right with that. We'll have a look at an example. Your example might be different, and that's absolutely fine. So we'd write a function, drive a car. The brackets at the front just say we're sending nothing to the method, and the curly bracket says this is the start of our drive a car function. So what's the first thing we do? We get into a car. If you're not in the car, if the car's not in first gear, then we want to put the car in first gear because that's where we start. Put the clutch in, accelerate, release clutch, and away we go. So that might be one way of looking at driving a car. You've probably got a quite different one, but as long as you're getting the idea of how pseudocode works, that's the important thing. Let's look at another couple of examples. A while loop and also the if-else loops are very common, and we use those even when we're using pseudocode. So let's look at loading a school onto multiple buses for a school excursion. So it might be, while the number of people is less than the number of seats on the bus, what do? We seat a person in a seat on the bus. And then we go number of people on bus equals number of people on bus plus 1. So that's just basically saying if there's an empty seat, put someone in the seat and then add 1 to the number of people on the bus. And we keep going until, as the while loop says, the number of people is equal to the number of seats on the bus, and then we stop. What do we do then? We go to our next bus. So we fill up a complete bus, then we go to our next bus. And you can see how pseudocode is relatively easy to follow, and anyone should be able to pick up pseudocode and understand what you mean. Once you can write pseudocode, then you can code. It's just a matter of learning the language or the syntax of that particular language. And there's a massive variety of languages out there. We'll look at a couple, and then we'll look at a few more in detail in the extension part of this video. Lots of different languages, some of them, so Swift is the one Apple's used for app development, Objective-C. JavaScript is used a lot when doing web-based programming and has been around for a while now. Visual Basic, another very common language developed by Microsoft, and it's been around for quite a while now as well. Let's just look at a couple of examples and see how there's similarities between them. So we'll look at the Swift, Java and Visual Basic. So this is printing to the screen in Swift. We'd just write print and then in the brackets, quotation marks, hello world, and that would print to the screen, hello world. In Java, it's just system.out.println or print line, hello world, and Visual Basic, print line, hello world. So you can see here that they're very similar, and it's really just about learning those little subtle differences between each of the coding languages. So that's printing to a line. Let's look at another one. How would you call a method? So some of the methods that we came up with before, like go to sleep or drive a car or fill a bus. So in Swift, calling a method, we just write func, which is for function, short for function, my method. We put the curly brackets in, and any variables that we need to send to that method, we place in those curly brackets. But if there's no variables, it's just a open, close curly brackets. And then you've got the larger curly brackets, which says everything in here is part of that function. So you do whatever that method does. With Java, we say class instead of func or function, and then my method name, and exactly the same type of thing. At the end of each line in Java, we end with a semicolon. In Visual Basic, we might call it sub my method. Do whatever, again ending with a semicolon. So you can see that there are very familiar patterns across all coding languages. So once you learn one language, you can then very quickly pick up other languages, just learning those changes in syntax. It does take a little bit of practice to figure out some of the differences, but once you get the basic idea of coding, then you can apply it to a whole variety of languages. So best of luck with the coding. There's an extension video after this which really takes you into some of the other similarities and differences between a large variety of languages, and looks particularly at how you might code different sections in different languages. So if you want to, have a look at that after this.